My name is Riley Grant. I'm 36 years old, and I just got home to Cedar Falls, North Carolina, for the first time in over a decade because my sister Jessica was being commissioned as a Navy JAG officer. Here's what nobody tells you: sometimes coming home doesn't feel like coming home at all. Sometimes it feels like walking into a room where your name used to be on everything, and now it's been scraped off like a sticker that didn't peel clean. The heat slapped me in the face the moment I stepped out of the rental. North Carolina in June, sticky and slow. I pulled my bag from the trunk and stood still in the driveway, trying to figure out if I even had the right house. Of course I did. Same navy blue shutters, same porch swing I broke my wrist falling off at age 8. But the flagpole, that was new. Red, white, and blue, with a little plaque beneath it that read, 3 generations of service. Inside the house smelled like lemon cleaner and spiral ham. Polished. Performed. Plastic perfect like the military brochures they used to hand out in high school. Voices buzzed from the kitchen. Laughter, forks scraping dishes. My mother passed by me in a blur tray of deviled eggs, eyes flicking up just long enough to say, "Oh, you made it." No hug, no smile. My father followed, tall and sharp as ever, though slower now. Navy Commander, Gulf War, vet, the kind of man who never forgot a rank or forgave a deviation. He looked at me like I was a census worker. "Didn't expect you to show," he said. Not cold, but not warm, just weather. My old room was stacked with wedding gifts and folded linens. I ended up in the laundry room, curled on a futon that smelled like detergent and mothballs. My name wasn't on any of the seating charts. At dinner, I got the folding chair at the end of the table, the one closest to the AC vent, and furthest from the photo wall, where Jessica's ROTC plaque now hung next to my brother Daniel's boot camp snapshot. Nothing of me. Not even my high school grad picture. During dessert, someone asked about me. I watched Jessica tilt her head and offer a soft laugh. "Riley," she said. "She used to serve, but she left early. I think she does wellness stuff now. Yoga, maybe." Laughter, polite, disinterested. I chewed my pie and stared down at my fork. You don't interrupt people who've already decided who you are. Until the door opened. Major Nathan DeWitt stepped inside the hall. Full dress uniform medals that caught the chandelier light. Mid-40s, commanding presence. He scanned the room, then stopped. Eyes locked on me. He walked forward, heels echoing sharp against the hardwood. "Then, ma'am." "Commander Grant." The room fell into a vacuum. Even the air seemed to hush. Jessica froze mid-bite. My mother's hand trembled, pie server clinking against glass. My father's jaw locked like it had taken a hit. I didn't blink, just nodded. No confirmation, no denial, just that truth suspended like smoke after a shot. Before I can continue my story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far this story reaches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. I grew up in a house where everything looked good on paper, where service was sacred and silence was strength. We said grace. We polished silver. We didn't ask questions, especially not about the daughter who disappeared after high school with no formal goodbye. But disappearing was never the hard part. It was surviving invisibility that left the scars. They didn't call me by name when I left, just her or the disappointment. The daughter who said no to the Naval Academy, the one who didn't follow orders, the one who at 18 boarded a government van in the middle of the night and never looked back. But I didn't leave because I was weak. I left because someone had noticed I wasn't. It started with a psych eval. That's the funny part. A personality test flagged me during pre-academy screening. Someone upstairs saw that I thought in patterns, that I followed orders, but only when they made tactical sense, that I didn't rattle under pressure. And apparently, that made me a candidate. A man with no name and a shaved head sat across from me in a fluorescent-lit room and said, "How far are you willing to go for your country if no one ever knows your name?" I didn't understand the question. I said, "As far as it takes." They took me at my word. Within a month, I was gone. My parents thought I'd had a breakdown. I let them think that. It was easier than explaining that I had been recruited into something so classified, even the name didn't exist on paper. We were 6, all women. No patches, no official records, just coordinates and code names and burn protocols. My code name was Echo Blue. My clearance level had no equivalent in civilian language. We worked without backup support or acknowledgement. We didn't exist. Our first op was in northern Yemen, in a dead town with no signs and too many ghosts. We moved through shadowed alleys like wind, dismantling an arms network operating out of a bombed-out elementary school. I still remember the alphabet posters on the walls. I still remember the smell of burned wire and rusted metal and cheap soap. No medals, no mentions. We were successful by military metrics. Politically, the whole thing was too gray. Our team didn't get honors. We got reassigned and erased. That's how it always was. One mission blurred into the next. Bosnia, Syria, Azerbaijan. I started to forget what my own voice sounded like when I wasn't whispering coordinates. We lived like ghosts because that was the job. But ghosts don't come home. Not really. Not to front porches and potato salad. And what do you do now? The cost wasn't just being gone. The cost was not being missed. Back at the house after DeWitt's salute, nobody spoke. My mother busied herself with dishes. My father refilled his coffee twice. Jessica didn't look at me. Not even when I walked out onto the porch and sat on the swing alone. And I knew then I'd always be the one they couldn't explain. A daughter-shaped shadow they learned to ignore. But the silence. It was different now. It had an edge to it, like someone had heard just enough truth to know there was more. The next morning before dawn, I checked into a small motel outside town. Same name I always used, Marin Cole. Burner credit card, no ID swipe. I opened the encrypted laptop I'd kept buried in a false-bottom duffel for years. It booted slow, the hum familiar, like an old heartbeat. There was a blinking red message. High security alert. Internal breach. OP Echo Ridge. Unauthorized access civilian clearance. My stomach dropped. The source IP. Jessica. I stared at the screen, waiting for the words to change, to clarify, to make more sense than they did. But they didn't. There it was. Unauthorized access. Operation Echo Ridge User Grant, Jessica.NROTC. I gripped the edge of the desk. Hard. My hands ached, the tendons pulling tight like they used to after a field op. I blinked 3 times before the letters stopped swimming. Jessica, my own sister. What had she done? I clicked through the layers of the alert. The breach wasn't just a basic skim. She had tripped a legacy lock, an embedded protocol, that flagged any access to Echo Ridge outside top-tier channels. It had been set 10 years ago, buried so deep I'd forgotten it existed. And she'd tripped it. The worst part, it wasn't even intentional. I knew it. Knew her. She wasn't malicious, just curious, naive. The kind of curiosity that cracks something open without knowing the gravity of what's inside. I ran a trace. She'd accessed it 2 nights ago from the university's secure military archive, researching female roles in special forces. Probably trying to pad a paper or impress some supervisor. But she'd stumbled into classified live wire. And now it wasn't just about what she saw. It was who else had seen her see it. I opened the failsafe log. There it was. Her access had pinged the Congressional Oversight Mirror server. Why that server? Because back in 2014, a defense senator named Howard Sloan had requested temporary Echo Ridge visibility for a review on gender-integrated units. That access window had never been fully closed, and now someone inside that committee knew a civilian had accessed an op they were hoping stayed buried. I felt sick. I closed the laptop and sat back staring at the water-stained ceiling. Echo Ridge wasn't just any op. It was the mission that broke us. 6 women went in. 4 came out. 1 with her leg in pieces. 1 with no voice after what they did to her in that concrete room. I was the team lead. We dismantled a black market trafficking pipeline using a telecommunications front. It was fast, brutal, and politically volatile. And afterward, the official summary made it sound like a patrol exercise. But I had the real logs, the field notes, the decrypted comms, a drive I kept on me like a second spine. I pulled it out from the satchel I hadn't opened in years. Thin, solid black. A deck of card-sized SSD loaded with data that could ruin people and save others. And now, because Jessica poked a sleeping bear, someone was actively moving to erase every record of that op for good. I rechecked the Pentagon alert. There it was. Security recommendation contained narrative. Seal files. Review chain of command anomalies. Translation: someone wanted this to disappear before questions got louder. And I knew exactly who that someone was. Colonel Everett Slade. He'd been JSOC's senior operations architect during Echo Ridge, had tried to classify it as logistically unstable, said we were a social experiment that almost failed. But we hadn't failed. We'd survived. Now Slade had motive and access. Jessica's accidental breach was the perfect excuse to bury us. I opened a secure comms line punched in a buried contact string I hadn't used in years. It rang twice before a voice answered. Gruff, familiar. Riley. It was Sam Alvarez, Echo Ridge Bravo lead. I didn't say hello, just they're trying to erase us. Sam didn't say much. He never did. After Echo Ridge, he disappeared into intel analysis somewhere in Nevada, a job that let him avoid the spotlight and keep a bottle within reach. But his voice that night was clear. Slade, he asked. Confirmed. A long pause. I could almost hear him scrubbing a hand over his face. What's the damage? Jessica tripped a dormant protocol. They're calling it a security anomaly. But I already pulled the admin logs. Slade's behind it. He's moving files, redirecting packet trails, prepping a memo for a hearing. Sam exhaled hard. They're spinning it as instability, aren't they? Exactly. That was the word. Instability. The one they loved to float whenever something didn't fit their optics. A female-led team, off-book, no medals, no media, no chain of evidence. That wasn't bravery to them. That was a liability. And now, with Jessica's access on the record, Slade had everything he needed to reframe Echo Ridge. Not as a mission that succeeded despite impossible odds, but as a cautionary tale. He'd already begun. I accessed the Congressional Mirror and found it an internal working draft labeled Case Review Operation Echo Ridge. Just 7 pages, sanitized, summarized, surgical. They stripped it down to bare bones. Field team operated without redundancy. Risked destabilizing covert relations with allied factions. Decision-making showed hesitation during critical engagement window. I read that line twice. Hesitation. They meant me. Because I halted an airstrike when I saw 2 children run into a compound. Because I made a call that went against standing orders. But we still completed the mission. We pulled the intel. We collapsed the network. And those kids lived. That's what they called hesitation. And tucked in the metadata of that memo, Slade's digital signature. His login timestamp. It was recent, less than 48 hours ago. That wasn't all. I checked secondary comms logs. There was another outgoing transfer. A stripped version of the ops summary had been sent to Senator Sloan's Defense Advisory Board, under the subject line, Pending Review Tactical Discrepancies in Experimental Combat Units. This wasn't containment, it was a smear campaign. My pulse thundered in my ears. I pulled the SSD from my satchel, opened it, searched for one file. Echo Ridger Log TG21. The unredacted field report written by me, time-stamped in the moment, down to every heartbeat and every casualty. I read the first line out loud just to hear it again. 4 confirmed hostiles, 1 child in sight, strike aborted, mission rerouted, team survived. I'd made a decision that day that probably saved our team and definitely saved lives. But Slade was about to use that moment to burn everything down. I called Sam back. I'm not letting him win. Then you better prepare for war, he said quietly. Because if Slade's cleaning house, you're still on his list. Maybe at the top. I leaned back in the chair, heart-pounding fingers twitching. Not fear, something worse. Rage. Because for 15 years I stayed silent. I let the narrative be dictated by people who never held a weapon, never walked into a kill zone without air cover, never watched a teammate sob into blood-soaked gravel. But silence is not the same as weakness. And if they were rewriting our story, I was going to hand them the pen sharpened to a blade. I drove straight to the Grant house after midnight. No lights on inside, just the soft glow from the porch lamp and the shadow of the flag casting long stripes across the front steps. I parked 2 houses down, walked the rest. Old instinct, avoid the cameras. Stay quiet. When I knocked, it wasn't my father who answered. It was Jessica. Hair pulled up t-shirt and sweatpants mascara smudged under one eye. She looked like she hadn't slept. She looked like someone who'd touched something hot and was still waiting to feel the burn. Cass, she stopped herself. Riley, we need to talk, I said. She stepped outside without hesitation. I followed her around the back, through the gate to the porch swing we used to fight over as kids. The one that creaked just enough to remind you time was moving. We sat without speaking. The cicadas screamed from the trees. I didn't know she said first. I was doing research for my JAG paper. I opened a folder marked Female Integration Protocol and, "You hit Echo Ridge." She looked at me sharply. That's what it was. I nodded. A mission that never happened according to everyone who matters. She swallowed hard. I swear I didn't mean to trigger anything. I didn't even know your name was in there. It wasn't, I said. Not fully, just a tag, one line. But that was enough. She looked like she wanted to cry. Not out of guilt exactly. Out of the kind of fear that comes when you realize you've woken something nobody prepared you for. I thought you just left, she whispered. All those years? You never said where you went. I stared out at the yard. Same white lattice fence. Same concrete angel near the rose bush. I wasn't allowed to say I replied. And even if I could have, would anyone have believed me? She didn't answer. You remember Sergeant Morrison? I asked suddenly. Dad's friend. Came over every July 4th with barbecue ribs and those terrible flag shorts. Yeah, he vouched for me. When I first got recruited, said I could handle it, said I could disappear if it meant something real. Jessica looked down at her hands. He died 2 years ago. I know. Silence again. Heavier this time. Then she said it. I want to help. I turned my head slowly. Help how? I want to speak at the hearing, if there's going to be one. I triggered this. I should be the one to tell them what happened. That won't fix it. No, she said, but it might stop them from pretending again. I studied her. For the first time since I came home, she wasn't standing in front of me like an officer or a golden child or a silhouette I could never reach. She was just Jessica, the girl who used to steal my socks and leave notes under my pillow when I had nightmares. Do you even know what you're stepping into? I asked. No, she admitted. But you do, so teach me. And something cracked open in me slow quiet. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. The next morning, I didn't go back to the motel. I drove instead to the War Memorial outside Fort Langston. It's not a big one, just a curved black wall near the highway with etched names and a wind-torn POW flag above it. People don't visit it much. I sat on the bench across from it and opened my laptop, logged into the black net. The architecture hadn't changed much, not since my last classified drop. The language was still bone-dry military code, but the message was loud and sharp. Operational Review, Commander R. Grant, Echo Blue Status, Decommission, Recommendation, Integrity Inconclusive. There it was. They were moving to formally declassify me, not with a medal, or even a footnote, but with a question mark. A whisper, a polite deletion, and right beneath it, Assignment Request Pending, Operation Desert Nail Mission Command, Slot Grant R. Provisional. I stared at the words until they blurred. Slade wasn't just trying to erase me. He was trying to bury me under a new mission, a trap. Operation Desert Nail. Target Crimson Dawn, a rogue network of mercenaries and traffickers operating in collapsed territories across Yemen and Somalia. Multi-pronged threat matrix. Civilian interference expected. Political fallout guaranteed. It wasn't a promotion, it was a crucifixion. If I failed, they could blame it on emotional compromise. If I hesitated, they'd cite Echo Ridge again. If I died, they'd close the file and sleep like babies. I shut the laptop hard enough to make the screen flicker. You don't send someone like me into a firestorm unless you hope I don't come back. Later that day, the call came through official channels. Assignment confirmed. Departure in 96 hours. I was expected to brief a composite SEAL team at Fort Sentinel. Mixed gender high clearance, half of them probably handpicked to report back on every twitch of my eyelid. I said yes, not because I wanted to, because I wasn't going to let them write the last chapter. I pulled out the old SSD again. My insurance. The truth. I slid it into a hollowed-out book in my go bag. Not poetic, not dramatic, just necessary. Later that night, Jessica texted me a single line. I filed the petition. If they'll hear me, I'll speak. And I just sat there in my rental car outside the gates of Fort Sentinel, staring at that message. because I'd never expected anyone in my family to speak on my behalf again, let alone the sister who once said I used to serve. A knock on the window startled me. A young soldier, clipboard in hand. Commander Grant. I nodded. Your team's waiting in Hangar C. Copy that. I stepped out of the car boots, crunching on gravel. The wind kicked up red dust across the horizon. I walked toward the hangar like a ghost returning to the place she died. Not for glory, not for redemption, but to finish what they tried to bury. Hangar C smelled like fuel sweat and skepticism. The kind of heavy air that doesn't move unless someone kicks it. A group of 12 operators sat or stood near gear pallets, half dressed in tactical prep, the other half watching me like I was some myth they didn't buy. One man stood apart, arms crossed, posture, tight, jaw clenched. Young, mid-20s. Clean cut, too clean. You're Commander Grant, he asked. Not curious, challenging. That's right. I was told I'd be leading this op, he said. Lieutenant Jake Reynolds. I looked him over. His insignia gleamed. His sleeves were rolled sharp. The kind of soldier who made rank fast because he never questioned orders until now. You were told wrong, I replied, stepping past him toward the mission brief monitor. Reynolds muttered something under his breath. I didn't ask him to repeat it. Instead, I loaded the intel packet and turned to the team. We're headed into the Al-Sharak corridor. Crimson Dawn has a foothold there, communications hub, weapons stockpile, and a field commander we need alive. This isn't a hit and run, it's surgical. Someone in the back coughed. I ignored it. I laid out the 3-unit strategy breach infiltration rearguard. Full sweep and silent exit. 7 exit contingencies. Every angle covered. Nobody said a word, but they listened. And then the next morning the leak hit. A military watchdog blog posted an anonymous story, Commander who froze in 2012 now heads Crimson. Dawn Op. They quoted a confidential source, claiming I hesitated during a high-value firefight, endangering the team and compromising a mission. It wasn't just lies. It was repackaged truth twisted sideways. The blog didn't have evidence, but they didn't need it. The damage was done. The doubts had teeth now. At the next briefing, the silence was thicker. No jokes, no nods, just glances exchanged when I entered the room. Like they were waiting to see if I'd crack? I didn't. I met every eye, then opened the map overlay on the wall. You're not here to believe in me, I said. You're here to complete a mission. If you want to test me in the field. Otherwise, keep your head down and do the job. Reynolds didn't flinch, but his jaw worked a little harder. I knew then what they were all thinking. If this goes sideways, they'll pin it on her. But I'd led missions where GPS failed and blood ran ankle deep. I'd carried men out with broken ribs and jammed rifles. I didn't need their belief. I needed their discipline. And I would earn the rest, or die proving it. After lights out, I walked to the empty rec room and stared out the high window. Somewhere beyond that glass was the desert waiting for me. A place where silence wasn't passive, it screamed. Sam once told me, war doesn't care if you're tired. It just cares if you show up. So I showed up, again and again. And I would keep showing up until every lie they told about us burned down to ash. We hit the dirt just before sunrise. Al-Sharak wasn't much to look at: flat desert, crumpled by wind with craggy outcrops, and dust that clung to your teeth. The heat was the kind that settled into your lungs and didn't leave. Our 3 teams split fast. I took the northern breach team. Reynolds led the infiltration unit. Mason handled the rear guard. The rhythm clicked in sharp and precise. Everyone moved like they'd done this 100 times. But there was tension, the kind that sticks in your spine. No one said it, but I knew they were waiting for me to freeze. Halfway through the breach, static cracked over comms. Contact West Corridor, multiple hostiles, Hayes shouted. Map's wrong. These alleyways aren't in the satellite feed. I pulled up the terrain overlay. He was right. The ambush route wasn't on any of our recon maps, which meant someone fed us doctored intel. My stomach turned to ice. Holes in maps don't happen by accident. Seconds later, Reynolds came on comms. We're boxed in. Repeat, 3 wounded. We need extraction, or we're done. There wasn't time to second guess. I rerouted half our unit, issued false traffic on enemy frequencies to confuse their comms, and moved. I led the flank team myself. That wasn't protocol, but I wasn't about to lose people over someone else's sabotage. We hit the ambush alley fast, smoke precision, fire, zero hesitation. I pulled Reynolds out myself. His thigh was bleeding, his face ghost pale. I slung his arm around my shoulder and dragged him through the haze, while haze covered us with a jammed rifle and knuckles bloodied from hand to hand. Then we found it. A buried concrete access door beneath loose rock. I kicked it in. We descended into a cold, low-ceilinged tunnel strung with wiring and heat sensors. Inside a control room, radio towers, surveillance streams, 3 servers pulsing with stolen signal data, and a timer. 15 minutes. A bomb linked to GSM pulses targeting our forward base in Alcatier. I stepped in alone. Alvarez tried to stop me. I didn't let him. The timer glowed like a heartbeat, 12 and 23, 12, 22. I opened the casing, clipped 2 wires, cracked the old system. A confirmation beep echoed. Manual override confirmed. Last access 2012 Echo Blue. 12 years, and the system still remembered me. I cut the master line at 10:09. The room went black. When I walked out, everything was still. Reynolds stood, his bandaged legs stiff. He raised his good arm and gave me the first salute I'd seen from him. "Commander," he said, voice level. "I'm sorry I doubted you." I nodded once. Not because I needed it, but because he did. Back on the flight, silence hung over us, but not the kind from earlier. This one felt like something had been settled, something they'd seen with their own eyes. When we landed, I was summoned immediately. A formal notice waited testify before the Defense Oversight Committee. They'd seen the chatter, the press leak, the intel trail. Slade's name was in the logs, and the SSD in my go bag, it held the rest. I wasn't going to testify for redemption. I was going to testify because the truth once spoken cannot be erased again. The Pentagon Hall was cold. Too cold. Everything gleamed, polished floors, mirrored badges, uniforms stiff with ceremony. Rows of officers filled the gallery, journalists lining the back like vultures waiting for a stumble. I walked in wearing my full dress uniform, first time in years. My boots echoed with every step. People turned. Some squinted, some whispered. A few just watched, unmoving. Colonel Everett Slade sat dead center, hands folded, smug as stone. He didn't flinch when I passed. I didn't flinch either. They called me to the mic. I stood before the committee, hands, steady voice, low but clear. "I'm Commander Riley Grant. SEAL designation Echo Blue. 12 active shadow operations, 4 foreign theaters, 0 failed missions." I laid out Operation Echo Ridge in sharp detail, the target, the betrayal, the civilians, the override call. I presented the body cam footage, grainy but undeniable. Showed the intercepted satellite logs. Highlighted the altered files. Then I pulled up the login trail. The intel map we used for Operation Desert Nail was doctored from inside, I said. This IP address links directly to Colonel Slade's terminal, confirmed by server records and biometric access logs. Gasps rippled through the room. Slade leaned back, mask cracking slightly. And then Jessica walked in. No announcement, no warning. Just her in uniform, face pale but composed. She walked straight to the witness table, handed the committee chair a small hard drive, and spoke. "My name is Jessica Grant. I'm the one who triggered the Echo Ridge protocol. I didn't know what I found. But now that I do, I'm here to tell you, my sister didn't fail. She saved lives." She clicked the drive into the display system. Firewall logs filled the screen. "This is the override signal," she said. "Manual injection. 13 hours before deployment. It redirected teams into exposed terrain. It was deliberate." The room was dead silent. Slade finally stood. "This is fabricated." "Sit down, Colonel," one commissioner snapped. Then she turned to me. Her voice was steady, but I saw the glint in her eyes like steel. "Commander Grant, your record has been sealed for over a decade. What we see today doesn't just speak to your service. It speaks to everything the system failed to protect. You are not the experiment. You are the evidence that it worked." Slade was removed that same afternoon. No ceremony, just a silent escort and an open investigation. The committee reinstated my record, every operation, every clearance, every buried line. I wasn't invisible anymore. Outside on the Pentagon steps, a crowd had gathered. Some reporters, some veterans, and a few old faces from town. A man in uniform walked up, silver hair, eyes I hadn't seen soften in 20 years. "My father." He didn't salute. He just took my hand. "I was wrong," he said. "You did what I never could, and I'm sorry for not seeing it." My mother followed behind him. She wrapped her arms around me, whispering, "I'm sorry I never asked." And then I saw her, a little girl in a denim jacket, holding a single purple flower. She stepped forward shy. "I want to grow up like you," she said, brave but quiet. I knelt, took the flower. "You don't need the world to know who you are," I told her. "Just make sure you do." The community hall in Cedar Falls hadn't changed in decades. Same uneven floorboards, same rickety folding chairs. The coffee still tasted like burnt hope and bad memory. But this time, it was full neighbors, old classmates, veterans in threadbare caps, students from the local college. The podium felt too tall. I didn't wear my uniform, just a soft gray shirt and jeans. In my pocket, I carried the red signal wire I'd pulled from the Crimson Dawn bomb, a reminder of where I'd been, of what nearly erased me. Jessica introduced me. She didn't read from a script. She didn't wear a polished grin. "I used to believe my sister disappeared because she couldn't finish what she started," she said. "Now I know she was the only one who finished what the rest of us couldn't even begin." Behind her, the projector lit the wall with a photo. Me in the desert. Helmet off, eyes unflinching. No name beneath it, just a single line. "Not every hero is in the frame. Some are the frame itself." When I stepped up, the applause didn't feel performative. It didn't feel like pity. It felt like acknowledgement. Maybe even gratitude. I cleared my throat. "I used to think the worst thing was being forgotten," I said. "But it's not. The worst is being invisible to the people you love, wondering if you ever mattered in their version of your story." I looked across the rows. My dad was sitting front row, back straight. My mother had her hand on his knee. But when the people who erased you finally choose to listen, it's not about their apology. It's about whether you're ready to be heard. I held up the red wire. Thin, frayed, coated in dirt and truth. They wanted to bury this. And me. And everything we stood for. But stories don't die just because someone skips your name in a speech. They live in moments, in choices, in lives saved even when nobody was watching. I looked at Jessica. She smiled, small, tired, real. "I don't need a plaque or a parade," I said. "I just need to know that the truth is heavier than the silence." And today, I think it finally is. The room didn't explode with noise. It didn't have to. The kind of respect that matters doesn't shout. It just stays. Afterward, people came up to me one by one. Some shook my hand, some cried, some just nodded, eyes full. And then I found myself at the Grant family wall. 3 generations of portraits lined up in neat little frames. My grandfather in Korea, my dad in Desert Storm, Jessica crisp and smiling in her commissioning photo. And there at the end was me. No caption, no rank, just the desert photo, the red wire mounted beneath it. No more erasure, no more silence. Riley Grant, daughter, ghost, commander, witness. I didn't come back to be remembered. I came back to remind them they had forgotten. And now, they never will. Some wounds don't bleed. They echo. And for years I lived with the echo of being invisible to my own family. But through a breach, a mission, and a microphone, the truth surfaced, and I stood inside it. Have you ever been erased by the people who should have seen you first? Drop your story in the comments. Someone here will read it, I promise. If this meant something to you, like the video, subscribe, or send it to someone who needs to be reminded they matter, even when no one's looking. Your voice is your weapon. Use it. Thank you for listening. I see you.